Hey there everyone, my name is Cuddlecore and I'm a pro player for COG Gaming. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about my history with Tekken and my experiences with the community over the years.
Nice, and look at that.
Okay, nice Cuddlecore, the reads.
Light step attack, caught him with it.
Again.
Oh, she's so good.
Yeah, just, gets hit by the jab, which is super clutch with Fergus. And again, hop kicking, not respecting the frame advantage at all.
Oh yeah, pushing towards Fergus. Nice low berry on the run up. That was big, that was huge.
I've played every single Tekken game, but there are a few that have held a very special place in my heart. That game, it's one of my favorite games of all time, is Tekken Tag Tournament 2. Tekken Tag 2 is known to be it's a very difficult game. Tekken Tag 2 is a very difficult game. Completely more difficult in terms of the learning curve compared to Tekken 7. Though Tekken as a whole is complex, Tekken Tag 2 did not have frame data in the game, probably 50 to 60 characters, and they also introduced other mechanics. We had to do a lot of that work on our own. We didn't really have a lot of resources. We kind of had to look on YouTube sometimes. We watched Green Arcade, which is in Korea, like their Tekken death matches and things like that, because Korea and Japan at the time were definitely like the hubs for competitive Tekken, and then they still are, but like especially at that time, a lot of us Americans were watching them play. They had all this tech, this in-depth understanding of the characters, the mechanics, techniques, adapting, so we were always studying them, and I think that's really what bred some amazing players, because nothing was handed to us. The access to this content, this information to get better wasn't just accessible like that. It wasn't easy at all. And I'm really grateful to Tekken Tag 2, honestly, like the series itself and kind of what it taught me about. If you want something, if you want to get good at something, like you really have to go out of your way and you gotta ask people, you gotta research, you gotta look at the videos, you gotta do everything. You might have to go on a site that isn't in English or not translated in your language, and you might have to ask somebody, or you got to go out of your way. So I'm very appreciative to Tag 2 for that.
One good combo. Oh my God, that took off so much damage.
The punish!
Get the punish on the tag, raw tag.
My early start with Tekken started with Tekken 1. I was a little kid. The game had been out for a few years by then. Whatever my dad brought in the house, I was playing that as well. And Tekken was my jam. But thinking about how early on I had this deep love for all of them, but specifically I really enjoyed Tekken's 1 through 4, which includes Tag 1. And there's something about the atmosphere of the games, the characters, the music, the stages, the hit effects, like everything about it, even the darker moods of the storylines were something so memorable as a child. I remember Tekken Force from Tekken 3 and Tekken 4. I remember the introduction of Ling Xiaoyu in Tekken 3. I remember Jun Kazama being present in Tekken 2. I remember every single thing about those games because I still revisit them and I play them. Every single Tekken I've played has given me some sort of memory or experience that ultimately led me to wanting to compete in general. Some of the moments I was present for the Tekken World Tour finals, that was very exciting for me. I think a lot of them revolve around me being a part of the Tekken World Tour finals, whether it was spectating them making an announcement about characters dropping, or even just playing in the events, or watching a friend of mine in the top 20 play in those pools. Some of the ones that do stand out to me, being a part of that last chance qualifier for 2018 for the Tekken World Tour final. For every Tekken World Tour, there are the top 19 players who qualified by grinding it out in those tournaments leading up, months leading up to the final. And then there is the final spot that the last chance qualifier provides for a player to get that 20th spot. I actually was a part of it and got very, very far. I got 4th out of 320 people in the 2018 final. And doing that, I got to meet so many amazing players. I learned from everybody. I really got to see what my skill was like against some of the best international players that exist. And even aside from that, getting to watch my training partner Shadow in the 2019 Tekken World Tour final, he qualified and I was so proud of him. And the amount of work that he did in that event was just amazing. I know it wasn't as good as he wanted, but he beat Arslan Ash there, and at the time Arslan was pretty much like almost like undefeated. I'm pretty sure he was undefeated maybe at the time. And though Shadow didn't perform the way he wanted, an American top player taking out Arslan in the Tekken World Tour final pools was a very big deal, especially since by then Pakistan was like seen as like another hub for top tier Tekken. For Shadow to do that, I always knew, and I always know how strong and how capable he is. And seeing my friend and my training partner and seeing how all that training just pay off for him to make it into that spot. I was so proud. I was very, very proud of him. I can even think about a time where there was, I think it was another last chance qualifier for the World Tour. I think it might have been the first year of the tour. And it was like 12 tournaments in one day. And you had to like qualify for one by playing in it. It was just an entire day. I can't fully remember the format. All I know is that people were exhausted. The Tekken World Tour and the format has changed a bit over the years. It's evolved over time. We got to play more international competition because the World Tour came to existence years ago. What I think about Tekken as a franchise overall, it definitely started off as a beloved game, a game played in households, known as a household name, but didn't really reach the pinnacle of popularity until I think Tekken 7. Something that I always felt was so important to Tekken is the fact that no matter who you used in Tekken, if you knew what you were doing, if you could outplay your opponent, if you were just skilled, any character could work. Any character you played could be viable. And that's something that I loved and respect about Tekken. I love how fluid the game is. I love how the movement is. I know some people have had their concerns and complaints about the movement being nerfed in Tekken 7, and I definitely do see that as well. But the fact that we can still move, and movement is such an essential part of the game, I love it. And I think it still very much so is. I love that we have a massive roster, and kind of, the roster has expanded ×5 since the first Tekken, obviously, and that's the case for a lot of fighting games. But the fact that it's evolved and branched out so much from characters that aren't even in fighting games, I think it's amazing. I think with the franchise as a whole, I love that no matter what, that they continued to make them. That the love of the game, the passion that the community had, that the devs had, that it ultimately has brought us to Tekken 7. I think Tekken 7 is like, it's like a celebration of how great, like how great Tekken is. And it feels like Tekken 7 is like that end product where everybody now understands how amazing the game is. How the Tekken franchise has evolved as a whole, but has in some ways stayed the same since I've joined the community. As a whole, the popularity of Tekken has completely skyrocketed for Tekken 7. For a long time, Tekken was definitely, it was known, but on the same level as Street Fighter. It didn't have the same sort of popularity. Still was popular, but in terms of recognition and support and backing at like tournaments and things like that, I think sometimes Tekken kind of struggled. With Tekken 7, it became full-blown esports to me. There's more money to support the events, there were more sponsors, there were tours for it. It was a bit more established, more organized. They also added Rage Arts, which had never been in the game until 7. Rage Drive has never been in the game until 7. We have a lot more newer players. The game is a lot easier to get into, though still complex, but because of that 1v1 aspect, and I think because of the introduction of the new characters to Tekken 7, characters like Claudio, Chloe, Katarina, Shaheen, characters like that introduce newer players to the game and the mechanics of Tekken in an easier way. It makes it easier for a lot of people to get into. At the core, Tekken has definitely stayed the same when it's come to like the mechanics, the community, the popularity, the talent. Like that's all expanded because Tekken added a lot more features that brought in more people from different communities. There's a lot more pro Tekken players that I see, a lot more people making their way as pro Tekken players, sponsored and everything. We put our love and care and everything into that game, into that community. We invested so much into it. Though we didn't always have all the money, we had the dedication. And because of that, I think the reward for the community as a whole is the fact that Tekken 7 is probably the best 3D fighter out there right now and has been for a very long time. That's been the ultimate reward. So I'm glad a lot of things evolved and changed, as the game did too.